Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Hi, I'm Steve Evans, and welcome to Countercharge.
And I'm Chris Lynch, and welcome to Countercharge.
And I'm Matt Croger. Welcome to a very special evening where we're catching up with these two fantastic gentlemen from the United Kingdom about their journey through playing every single Kings of War army over the last year or so. But Steve, before we get into that, and so for someone who's a prolific poster on the Kings of War Countercharge page under your Lazy Pirate pseudonym, let's hear about your origin story, mate. How did you get into gaming first and then, finding your way into Kings of War?
Right, yeah. Well, I'm in my mid-50s now, so I've been gaming for a long time. First started back in the early 80s. I was always interested in war and toy soldiers, even back when I was a young child. So I played a lot with Airfix toys, built model kits, stuff like that. Basically, I started off playing Dungeons and Dragons when I met a friend at school who was into it. He invited me around his house. So we done that for a few years. Joined a local gaming club, which is still running now, actually. I think it's been going for about 35 years now. It's called Lincoln Barn War Game Society. Joined that club. I was still just role-playing at the time. And when we got there to play on the first evening, they had all this wargaming going on. So it was mainly at the time, because we're talking early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. It was mainly like Napoleonics and stuff like that, because that was all that was around. Got into playing other war games. But the real changing point came when Warhammer Fantasy was first produced. So we'd been up to that stage. We'd been using our D&D models just to play like largest type games. But as you can imagine, using models out of the standard monster manual and stuff like that, but it was absolutely horrendous. So when Warhammer First Edition came along, it was like, oh my God. An actual war game. We can play like the other people. So I went along and I played first all the way up to 8th edition, different types of levels. Some editions I played more than others. I got into playing tournaments in about 4th or 5th edition, I think it was. So I hit the tournament scene then, all across the country. There's a couple of big tournaments going on at the time, run by the Warhammer Player Society, which I was a member of. So I played quite a few of the tournaments then. And then, we all know what happens to Warhammer Fantasy. So then I went off playing historical gaming for a while, because I'm a bit of an omni gamer anyway. I'm never just stuck to just playing fantasy. I play fantasy, sci-fi, historicals, whatever, skirmish, board games, card games, whatever. I'm just a gamer in general. So I went off playing historical games for quite a while. And then I was just down the club and there was someone playing Kings of War. This was like just as 2nd edition hit. And I just went straight over to the table. I was like, oh my God, what's this? Like rank and flank fantasy. It's like, oh my God. So that was it, really. That was it. I was sold. So I played Kings of War ever since.
Continue to be a bit of an omni gamer, or is Kings of War the main?
Oh no, I still play anything and everything. So
yeah. I
mean, mainly now, I would say the last 6 to 12 months, I play more other games than I play Kings of War. I mainly play Kings of War. It's my only event game, should we say. It's the only game I play tournaments, competition-wise. All the other games I play at my local club. But I'm quite lucky. I've got a local club that I'm treasurer of, the Bristol Big Uns. And we meet once a week. So I get to play once a week. Well, most weeks. So that's about it.
Excellent. Oh, thanks for that. Chris, Well, the listeners have heard from you a couple of times before, so we probably don't need to revisit an origin story.
No one wants to hear from me again. No,
No. So we might just roll straight into our hobby updates. And Chris, have you been working away on anything?
Yes, I have actually, Matt. I think I've been on twice before, and both times I've said, "Yeah, I'm about to start doing something. I'm about to start doing something," and then no progress had been made. So I'm working on Night Stalkers at the moment. I had based and modelled at like probably about 3,000 points worth or something, and then over last summer I just started. I picked up the paintbrush again and have been slowly getting through that. Not really painting to any particular army like list or anything like that. Just whatever I felt like painting, and I've got through a bit. Progress has stalled in the last month or so because I've picked up Baldur's Gate 3, which is taking up too much of my time. So the Night Stalkers, although I was doing a little bit this afternoon on a Scarecrow Horde, so I'm making some decent progress. I'm hoping to kind of get 3,000 or 4,000 points done by kind of middle of the year, something like that, and then I can start just pick a mixing and taking them to tournaments for the second half of the year. But really enjoying it at the moment. First time I'm using contrast paints, or not contrast, I'm using the Vallejo Express ones as the base, and really enjoying that. And Night Stalkers lend themselves really well to that type of paint. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things I like about any of those speed type paints is that it brings it to a look of looking decent much more quickly than your traditional methods. How when you're painting using the old layer method, like you get to all your base coats on, you're like, man, this looks like shit. There's still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think in terms of motivation, that really helps because you feel like you're making progress, even if you've done kind of the easy bit, and then you can go back and highlight if you want and add bits and bobs on. But it really feels like you're making progress quite quickly, which then encourages you because it feels worthwhile, and so you keep going. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Steve, you're a prolific painter. What are you working on at the moment?
Well, I've been working on. I've been into Midgard lately, so I've been playing that quite a bit at my local club. So I've just been putting together a couple of armies for that. So I'm at the end of finishing a Arthurian army at the moment. But I'm also keeping up with the King's War stuff. So I've been finishing off a few Abyssal bits and pieces that I had. I got a large Abyssal army anyway, but I managed to pick up the newer stuff the end of last year. So I've added that to my list, and there's a few more boxes that I'm a bit of a hoarder and a stasher. So if I see a deal, I buy it. I'll put that back, and I'll get back to that at some stage. So I just poured out to do the original Abyssal new stuff, and then it's always, I've got a box of this to do as well. I've got a box of that to do. So I'm working my way through that, and I'm also adding a few bits to my Ratkin slave army.
As someone that does paint a lot, has a lot of armies, and as you said, came through Warhammer, have you refreshed a lot of your armies for Kings of War over time, or are they legacy armies?
I got rid of all my Warhammer armies. I sold all of them. Basically, I'd already started selling them before I stopped playing. So I got to the level where I had all the Warhammer armies, and it was like, I'm just not using them because I wasn't enjoying the game. And I'd gone off dabbling with other, as I say, because I play lots of different systems. And I was only getting around to playing Warhammer like once every couple of months. So in the end, and family things, and things change at home, and you need the money, and blah, 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 blah. And it was like, kids were growing up at the time, and it was like, needed the money for everything. So,
and then what's happening for you guys in the local community? What do you got coming up, or what's happening? Let's start with you, Steve.
Next tournament I've got is the Ball Run in Birmingham. I think you're going to that as well, Chris, aren't you?
Yeah, I will be doing that one. Yeah.
So that's my next tournament. But as I said, I play every week, so that's about it, really. I just play at my local club every week. So.
Yep. And is there a reason why Kings of War isn't the weekly game? Are there not as many at the club that enjoy it, or you find it not as enjoyable?
We've got plenty of people that play it, but we've got plenty of people that play it. It's just, as I said, we've got plenty of people that play other games as well. So, I seem to be the person that gets booked up quite quickly because I play so many games. So I'm normally booked up for my gaming night on a Sunday, like two months in advance. Because you start getting other games playing, campaign games playing and stuff. I'm playing a sharp practice campaign with another one of my friends, AWI, American War of Independence. And so we play that once a month. And then there's another player, as I said, I've been playing Midgard. And by the time you take all these to account, I just don't get a chance to play it. I think that's a great thing with Kings as well. It doesn't make really that much difference for a gamer like me. I'm not like to Chris's level, so I'm not really hardcore tournament player, shall we say?
Yeah, and
you do a fair few tournaments those days.
Oh yeah. I enjoy it. You know what I mean? As I said,
we played a fair few times.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
It must be tough being that popular.
Oh, it is terrible.
Yeah. But we all now, after seeing him on the stream, we all know how Chris got so good. It's by rolling too many dice. I've been waiting for the first mention. Waiting for the first mention.
Yeah, you've been saving that one up, haven't
you? Don't worry, I'm sure I'll manage to bring it in.
You commentated.
It was.
Yeah, that was the one you commentated, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, the shame. That was embarrassing.
So those times you beat me by one dice roll, Chris.
Yeah. I seem to remember last time, actually, Steve, I beat you by you failed by one dice roll. I think you needed like a that was a really close one. So yeah.
The last two games have been like, I think the last game it was I had to roll an 8 twice and I didn't, and I think the game before that you had to roll 7 twice and you did.
Yeah. No, Steve is definitely underselling himself. He's a very accomplished player. I think, it sounds like you've got decades and decades of experience, and that would explain why. But he's a very good player. He's always lurking there or thereabouts when I see him at events.
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell Steve that when he was joining his gaming club, I was probably not yet born.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Hey, when you said first edition Warhammer, I didn't realise that. Yeah. I didn't realise you started right at the very beginning.
Yeah, every edition. Well, except for the end times. So all 8 editions I played. So
yeah, you wouldn't tell, would you? He looks good. Yeah. And what about for yourself, Chris? What's going on locally, and what are you up to?
Not a huge amount. I mean, I'll probably be trying to do quite a lot of tournaments this year, as ever. But I think probably even more than I would normally.
Well, last year was a little bit lighter for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I kind of 12 to 15, somewhere in that region is good. Try and get in one a month, but I'm going to push it a bit higher this year, I think. Partly because we're possibly, I mean, no one knows this for certain, but some people probably do, but there's rumours of a new edition at some point soon. So try and pack in as many as possible. And having done this army rotation, I've got so many different lists for different factions that I want to try that I didn't have a chance because it was one and done every time. And so there were so many other ideas that got cut. And then the other thing, annoyingly, one of our local 2 kind of main local venues where I used to play has stopped hosting gaming nights, so I'm going to be doing less casual gaming against the local guys. So to make up for that, try and do a few more tournaments to keep the count up. But I'm doing Bull Run. I've got another couple in between. Then bit of a break in April, and then it gets very busy. Kind of May, June, July. There's a lot going on.
Yep, and then Bull Run is Mark Cunningham's. Is that his tournament?
Mr. Hildrew.
No, Steve Hildrew.
Oh, it is Steve.
Shroud of the Reaper.
Oh, right. Yep, that's right.
Steve. I've asked Steve. He's kindly going to lend me an army for Bull Run this year. He's going to write the list, one of his armies, and not tell me what it is before I turn up.
Oh,
and play
interesting. That'll be good.
So it should be quite fun.
Yeah.
So hopefully he writes me something good. Yeah, no. The orcs have got to go in before then because I'm borrowing Steve's orcs. You're noticing a pattern here, guys. I'm borrowing Steve's orcs for another tournament. I haven't decided between one of 2 that I'm doing before then.
I only say because I'm probably going to be looked to using them at a tournament after. So
I absolutely will. And there's another reminder.
Yeah, I mean the thing with Hildrew is like you probably go there, and it could go both ways. He'll either get the guilts because that's what he does, and he'll build you and he'll build you a decent list, or it'll just be something absolutely trash.
Well, if he's smart, he should write me something that he wants to play, and then I can test it for him and see how good it is, and then he can learn from that. Yeah. But yeah, he'll either write me something decent, or he'll deliberately try and hamstring me, which either way is fun. I don't mind.
Do you still got his Kingdoms of Men army?
I think so. He's got Nightstalk, he's got Twilight Kin, I think he got rid of his orcs. He's got Ratkin, I think. I feel like he's got one other as well. He's got a few. He's got a few different ones, but he does.
I think he's got the undead one.
Undead, yeah, he has undead. That's true. Yeah, it could be undead. So we shall see.
Well, we also know after watching you on the stream, Chris, that if he wants to learn how to play them, all he'll have to do is have a mic recording your audio for the whole game, and he'll hear about how each unit moves and everything. You know.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. Actually, I didn't really think about that before, but he is right. I do kind of narrate the game as I go on. It's I don't know. I think it's kind of like it's a mental checklist for myself, like vocalizing what I'm doing, so I know I'm doing, and also being super clear with my opponents. So, you know, if that unit slips off a hill and suddenly I'm within 12 inches when I said I wasn't, then we know why. And so it's Kings is a game of intent, and so that's quite important. But yeah, Steve likes to take the piss out.
Yeah,
it, so.
I certainly don't think it's a bad strategy. I do wonder, it probably helps you. I wonder if it helps you ingrain the plan in your head too, subconsciously by
yeah, exactly.
It,
I'm sure it does. Yeah. No, but it's repetition, kind of like, so as you say, kind of subconsciously reinforcing something. Yeah. This is what I want to do, because we've all been there where we've made like spent I had this great game against Andy Marshall recently where I spent like 3-4 minutes like carefully positioning stuff, trying to work it so I could defend every angle from a combat so he couldn't flank charge me, and then. As I was doing the reform, I changed my mind mid and like sidestepped the unit instead of just pivoting it slightly, and just opened up the flank that I'd wasted so much time trying to cover. And so we all do that. So by kind of like reinforcing it vocally, then that helps sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, and for us locally, we've just had announced a new local tournament, which is nice. It's unfortunately running at the same time as the Sydney tournament, but we're in Canberra, where I am, we're a big base for Australian Defence Force, and so they have a yearly Defence Wargaming Con, and we're going there for the first time. I always forget his rank, but Air Commodore or Vice Marshal John McGarry is going to run it for us. So we're getting more and more people locally who are putting their hand up to actually run a tournament, which is excellent. Going back, 5 years ago, it would be myself running, 5 or 6 tournaments a year, but now I'm in the lucky position where I can just focus on Clash of Kings Australia and we can get that in. So we're just having a little 1-dayer, 3 games, 2,000 points. I think we're limiting the number of people that can go, and we're just hoping to get some new eyes on the game at a place like that, because I certainly know it is in the Australia and the US. I don't know. Steve, you might be able to tell us, in the UK, military, a big population of wargamers as well?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of people in the military or ex-military people that play. We've had a number of them come and go at the club I go to, so because we've got quite a few type of military areas around where I live. So they come in for their like 6 to 12 months stay, and then play at the gate, and then play at the club, and then off to another assignment.
Yeah, so I'm hoping it'll be a good opportunity for us to maybe, so for some guys that haven't seen the game to get a bit of a sight on it, and we'll go from there. That's why that's why we're persisting, despite the fact that there's a tournament not that far away on the same day. It's just a too good opportunity to miss to get some new eyeballs on the game. So.
Sometimes you need to do that, though, don't you? You need to, it's all right, as they say, preaching to the people that already play, but it's trying to get the new players in, isn't it? So,
well, that's right, and it's the good thing about Kings, right? Is that they could be playing another game, and it's not too much effort to slide their army over and give something else a crack. So,
that's right.
That's going to be a great opportunity for us. So with that, let's slide into a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have our main topic.
Hi, I'm Plastic Roger. I'm listening to Canada.
And welcome back. So tonight, as mentioned at the top of the show, we're joining together to talk about these two lunatics and their journey through playing all 28 armies. I guess the first thing I want to ask is, are we literally talking a 12-month time span or a bit longer, or what are we?
Oh, no.
Took me 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And
yeah, for me it was.
Sorry, I would say 2.5 years, and it was actually 29 armies, not 28. Please.
28.
Lies. Noble Undead is not a separate faction.
Wow.
It doesn't count. So yeah, I'm a fraud. I only did 28, not 29. It's not a faction. For me, it was like 2 calendar years. So it was beginning of 23 through to the end of last year. So yeah, it's in 1 year would be mad. There are some people on the tournament scene in the UK who do kind of around 20 events, kind of 20, 21 maybe is the highest I think I've ever seen. But yes, all 28 in 1 year would be
crazy.
Balmy.
That would be absolutely mad.
Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah. I certainly don't think you'd be able to manage it at tournaments, would you? To be at that point, you're just playing it in the garage.
Yeah. I think my missus would string me up if I said I'm going to 28 tournaments in a year.
Yeah. I'd be strung up at the 15 Chris is planning. So,
Yeah, that can be. There's deep negotiation that happens every year. But yeah,
understandably, and it probably leads us into a good question I picked out from the Countercharge audience straight up from Jed Courtney was why. Chris, or let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I suppose, kind of many reasons. Boredom, ADHD, just a desire to play something else. I think, it's a good way to experience the game in a lot of different ways by trying all the factions. You learn a lot by doing it. And I think when I started it, I've been playing Elves for Elves Silverkin, Old Twilightkin since the start of the edition, so about 3 years. And I just wanted to change. My other army is a kind of Nurgle-themed Abyssal Baron Gur army. So I was like, okay, I'll switch over and I'll start playing that. And I took it to a tournament and was like, yeah, this is a lot of fun. But actually, as I was doing all my list smashing, realised that a lot of I just didn't have that many options. So I was going to get bored of it quite quickly. So next tournament, I borrowed an Ogre army off a friend. And then I was at that tournament and the chap, one of my opponents, Mark Dell, who I was playing against, Steve, Mark, presumably he's another tournament regular, really prolific hobbyist as well. Actually, he churns out a lot. But yeah, I was playing him, and I was like, because the Ogre army I was borrowing, absolutely gorgeous army, Matt G's Pirate Ogres, and I said, don't vote for it, Mark, because it's not my army. And he goes, oh, it's not yours. Oh, right. Do you want to borrow my goblins sometime? And I was like, well, okay, all right, that sounds like fun. And that was kind of like the genesis of it. I was like, okay, I have, a couple of different armies, but they can proxy as a bunch of different ones. So I can do a load myself. And then I've got a good local group with a lot of different armies. I can maybe borrow off them. And I thought, actually, hang on, I could probably get through all 28 factions if I did that and kind of lean on the community a little bit because everyone's super friendly and helpful in the UK scene. And so, yeah, that's where it kind of started from. And then once I'd started, kind of got a bit obsessed and wanted to keep going and make sure I finished it off.
Yeah, you certainly do get obsessed.
Yeah. And what about for yourself, Steve? I mean, what I've picked up, what it seems like from your blog is that, like, you'd probably be doing this kind of thing anyway, but maybe...
I had, before I even started, I had 20 plus of the armies already done. So it was like, it's just that little bit of a push. Oh, yeah, I've got them here. Why don't I want to play with them? So... And then just
so Steve says a little bit of a push in inverted commas, 8 armies in a couple of years. Not, for me, that's like 1 army every 2 years if I'm lucky. Like that's a lot of productivity.
I think I painted about 3, maybe 4 armies last year. Not all King's War armies, but for different periods and stuff like that. And once I get into it, I'm obsessed with it. It's like literally, I think I painted 2 Midgard armies in the last month. So,
well, yeah, that's what I heard at the start when you were talking about, I'm just dabbling in Midgard, and so I'm just painting up a couple of armies, just to get me started.
It's still like 50, 60, 70 models an army, so, but I can literally paint rank all day long, you know what I mean? I struggle more with the larger models than I do with the smaller models. Just give me loads of infantry and I'd literally just like pile through them.
Why is that, you reckon?
To be fair, I prefer painting the kind of the rank and file these days as well, actually, rather than the big gribblies.
Yeah, okay. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
There's something quite satisfying about it. I think.
Get a unit done.
You can get productivity. Yeah, and you can get a rhythm going as well.
I batch paint as well. I normally batch paint about 8 to 10 models at a time. So you're there, you're doing the classic, especially if it's uniform, you're doing all the colour, that. But even if you're not, if you're doing I was doing a lot of AWI last year, and I was doing a lot of the militia, and each chap would be different. But he's got brown trousers, he's got brown boots, he's got brown hat, he's got brown coat. Right, on to the next colour, blah 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 blah. Yeah. And then before you know it, that's your 8-10 models done. On to the next one.
Yeah. Okay. And so, obviously, when it comes to doing 28, I think I'd imagine that you actually have differing starting points on how you choose the first. So, Chris, what brought you to be going? I mean, was your first even part of the I'm going to do 28, or you just happened to do?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was like I just want to change from the elves. So it was Varangur was the first one, and then that was when we had literally just moved home, so I didn't have any hobbies. So I was like, I can't paint anymore, so I'm going to need to run some other stuff, not just Varangur and Abyssal. So, Matt, can I borrow your ogres? And then so the second one was ogres, and then from there I kind of started. So at the beginning it was just, what do I feel like playing? What is easily accessible? What can I proxy my own elves for? Because it's like a woodland themed elves. So it can be Force of Nature, it can be herds, Green Lady, stuff like this. So it's quite easy to transfer. And then it was just who's local, who could happily lend me an army. And so that it was really quite scattergun and just like, what do I feel like playing? There wasn't really any kind of thought process behind it. And then as you start to narrow down and you're losing and you're running out of options, then second year I had to think a little bit more about planning ahead. Some armies are a bit harder to source because not as many people have them, or I don't know people who have them, and so I had to kind of think ahead and plan for tournaments, like where I could bother or pick up stuff at one tournament so it could go to the next one, and then like I was just saying with Steve around the orcs, like making sure we agree when I can drop them back and things like this. So there was a little bit more kind of planning involved, but not too onerous, to be honest.
Did you find that because for you some of it was proxying, that they did fit pretty closely when you were doing it? Did you ever have any pushback against any of the proxying?
No, I don't think so. And I mean, when I say proxying, I mean I've got 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 points worth of inverted commas elves, but within that there's air elementals and forest shamblers and stuff which can run as Force of Nature and things like this. My Dracons are kind of elves on eagles which can run as Scorchwings and things like that. So a lot of it does really kind of
it's still pretty
fit
obvious.
Quite naturally.
Yeah.
Just drop a tree herder into a 75 custom 75 millimeter base, that could be a giant in Kingdoms of Men.
Yeah.
Things like this. So most of the time it was there wasn't even no one's batting an eyelid. A couple of them probably were a little weird, but but mostly it was fine. Yeah, mostly it was fine.
Yeah, okay. And what about for yourself, Steve? At the start of the 2-year journey, where was your starting point? And was it just that you wanted to play it, or
it was your army? I was just finishing at that time, so it was undead at that time. I just finished doing my undead army, which was just like zombies and zombies and more zombies and zombies and.
Yeah. How do you feel about undead? I got rid of my undead. I sent it to our local gaming shed with my friends because it was just an army that I just felt like lacked flavour anymore or something. I just couldn't bring myself to play it anymore. It's just something I couldn't vibe with.
I really enjoy playing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially the zombie list. So that, yeah. But I'm very much into like theming my armies. So
yeah, okay, yep, all right. And then, well, we've already covered. I was going to, and so for you, Steve, less proxying was yours. Did you ever proxy anything? No.
Pure Steve.
No.
So Steve, you've literally got the 28 factions, do you?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And plenty more.
You should put a picture for Matt in the chat of your Kallax, Steve.
Yeah, I've got multiple Kallax now, so I think I've got.
Yeah, right.
Do you have this? Do you have IKEA presumably in Australia, Matt?
Yeah.
Does it make it that far? Yeah, so you know the Kallax.
Yeah, I've got so many Kallax with 50 glass cases now.
Yeah, wow. Must have a big garage or something, Steve, do you? Or is there just a whole room? Or
it's a room, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a good the advantage of the kids moving out again, isn't it? So yeah. I get one of the spare rooms, and the wife gets the other spare room. So she gets a dressing room, I get a gaming room.
What I want to know is how quickly after the kids moved out did that become a gaming room, and they come back and go, hang on now, what?
My youngest daughter still does complain when she visits. She goes, "Dad, where's the bed gone from?" No, sofa bed. It's uncomfortable, tough.
Yeah. This is my time.
This is mine now. My room.
And I think you've both covered that typically when we're talking about it, to tick this box, we're not talking about, 28 armies at hobbying nights. You're mostly talking about 28 armies across 28 events.
Yeah.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I said Noble Undead don't count, because I was kind of counting it by our UK Kings of War Masters site, which kind of keeps track of all of the different events that go on and how people have done. And so Undead are just one faction on that. Just get that in again, just to make sure we're clear. Yeah. So it's all of these are on that site. So like you can see the results on there. So there's a record of having played these all at a tournament.
So did any of them, I guess, particularly for you, Chris, but also you, Steve, did any of them get multiple tournament runs, or was it one and done?
For over that period for me.
Yeah, and I said the same, one and done. I mean, obviously, I had played Elves before, I had played Sylvankin before, so I was kind of replaying them, sort of, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Just to say I'd done all 28 in that 2-year period. I'd obviously played those for years before, but yeah, in terms of the last 2 years.
Yeah, basically what I done with mine was I played the Undead first, and then after that I put a poll up on my Facebook group. And we decided like a number of armies that I wanted to play next. So like 2 or 3, 4 armies, and then I put a poll up on my Facebook group and give people like a day or 2 days to choose, and then whichever they chose would be the next army I'd play at the next event.
Yeah, I'm not unlike that either, Steve. I think I enjoy playing Kings. I'm certainly no Chris Lynch when it comes to level of ability. And so,
keep massaging the ego, guys. I love it.
That's all right. And I think particularly with one-day tournaments, with our locals, I just want to play what other people want to be playing, and also not doubling up on armies. If you go to a 10 or 12 man person, and if there's 3 or 4 dwarves turn up, I'm just like, nah, that just makes it ordinary for everyone. So, I don't have the 28 armies, but I do enjoy just being flexible.
That's a bit like me at the moment. Literally, I'm just at the moment. If I thought I'm going to events now and say, what's the army that people aren't playing? Well, I'm going to take that army. So that's why at the moment I've hit Ratkin slaves at the moment. So they don't seem to be very popular. So I'm playing them for a while.
They are a lot of fun. Though.
Yeah, they are
a lot of fun.
I really enjoy playing them, to be honest. They are fun.
Underappreciated.
Yeah, there's actually some really good lists in there. Yeah, it's more just that I think thematically they're ordinary.
Oh, thematically, they're my worst army thematically, in the sense that don't get me started. You know what I mean? If Eddie Barr was here now, he'd be like going, "Oh, don't get him started about Ratkin slaves."
And I'm guessing because of that, I mean, Steve, probably actually not even different for you because you play so many games. But when you're winding up to take these, you're not going to get much practice with any of them. And Chris, you mentioned you weren't getting as much probably local gaming at a time. So
I normally get approximately a couple of games in with the new army. So I have been to events where I've had no practice of games at all, but Kings is Kings, isn't it? You know what I mean? Basically, it's such a simple rule set. And as I said, I'm not highly competitive, you know what I mean? So as long as I get there, have enjoyable games, I'm not really too fussed where I finish. We all like to win, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, I'd say similar I'd say probably for a majority, I'd get a game or two in advance with something. So just try, and then you kind of tweak the list a little bit. And then there were a couple where I had quite a few practice games with. So Basilea, for example, for a long time, I thought I was going to take them to Clash of Kings last year. So I probably had a good dozen games or so with them trying to test out different lists. And then changed my mind and took Northern Alliance anyway. But so I had quite a few of them. But yeah, quite a few tournaments. You just rock up, either because you pick the army up from someone you're at the tournament with, or you just haven't had a chance because of life pressures to get any games in for a few weeks, and so you just rock up with the army. And as Steve says, especially the more you play, the more you see everything, the more you know what everything does. It's and so many units are similar across different factions. You've got your standard, 15, 17 large infantry with melee 3 and crush 2 or whatever, and it's all very kind of transferable. So it's not too difficult to just turn up and play with stuff. I'd say majority are probably a couple of games, but quite a few it was just roll in.
Yeah, which is going to be very interesting, isn't it? Coming up to a 4th edition, whenever exactly that drops, and how that all changes, whether it's less armies, whether there's command dice, no command dice, list building. I imagine at the very least that there's going to be a new unlock system. So so it'll be interesting to see how that then knocks on to affect play style as well. Mm-hmm. Mm. Right, and we had heaps of questions when I put this up. Must be a few months ago in the Countercharge group, and the first one from Tom Freeman is: has any faction so far got your imagination going through a narrative background or hobbying rabbit hole? And if yes, tell us about it.
That's every single army that I do. It's basically I normally see a model, find a model, and all right, I'm going to build an army around that. And as I said, it doesn't make any difference to me if it's the unit's good, the army's good. If I picture in my mind what I've got set in my mind, then I'll just go ahead and paint it. So,
and what about for you? Is that how you came to Night Stalkers, Chris? Was it from did you fall in love with it during the trial, or your games with it, or was it there anything else that particularly fancy?
My Night Stalker list that I ran for the 28 factions was a third of it, about 700 points, was Spectres, which no longer exists. Oh, yeah. So no, it wasn't playing the army. It was a bit of a gimmick list, that one. But no, so for me, it's similar. It's all about kind of what the model range is, because I really enjoy the hobby aspect of it. Everyone thinks of me as a kind of a competitive gamer, but actually, I only started gaming against other people, if you like, other than my brother in the basement, when 3rd edition started, and I picked up Kings of War then. So I've always been someone who enjoyed the hobby side of things. And so for me, it's just what model range or model ranges appeal to me to get churning out units. And I wanted to do an all-mantic army, and Night Stalkers were a really complete and really good range for me. So they're the ones at the moment that's got my kind of imagination going, if you like, got the hobby juices going. So I would say them. I think they're really fun. And coincidentally, they are also quite, I think, a lot of fun on the table, because they've got a very competitive internal roster. There's a lot of different units doing different things, and they're just fun to play. So I'm really looking forward to them, actually.
Yeah, Night Stalkers was one of those ones across the table that took me quite a long time to get to grips with, because it wasn't an old school army. Yeah.
They don't compare with other armies as obviously as some do. They are quite different.
I reckon it took me a good year or so to be conceptually I have no idea what that is, but I think now most people do, and they've probably some of the unit types have aligned a little bit better now, and as well. But yeah,
I still can't get my head around Night Stalkers, full stop. The one army, I love my Night Stalker army. I love how I painted it, but just cannot play it to save my life. I don't think I think I've probably won about 1 game, 2 games with them over the year. I just can't get my head around them at all.
I think they are one of the more challenging ones. I think there are some which are like halflings, for example, are a really tricky army to get your head around when you're starting with them. But so I don't think they're the toughest Night Stalkers, but they are up there as one of the more challenging factions to get working.
As I said, I just can't understand why. I just there's nothing there that I shouldn't be able to get, but for some reason they just don't click.
Yeah, it's super challenging not to have to put inspiring in your list and having army-wide stealthy. Super challenging, isn't it, Steve? No. Yeah. I thought you were going to say, Chris, when you were game in the basement where you were locked as children, so that's how you got so good. It's because you had nothing else. You had nothing else to do. It was just 24 hours a day gaming. And so, next question was from Danny Graves, which is particularly to you, Chris. Having come to most of the 28 factions cold without prior experience and still coming top of the Masters list, do you feel it's now time to stop taking the piss?
Thanks, Danny. Yeah. I think I'd say to Danny, if I stopped taking the piss, if I stopped playing Kings of War, then I'd have more time on my hands to take the piss out of you, Danny. So careful what you wish for. As we said already, like kind of you just turn up and play, and when you play a lot, I think that helps. Doesn't matter what faction you're taking, you've just got the experience of knowing what everything does, and that makes such a big difference. But yeah, no, I'll be attending a lot of tournaments this year, Danny. So keep your eyes out.
Well, it's a good point too. I think Chris said at some point we should do a list builder with you, actually, because would you say that you've got a particular style that goes across lists, and then we'll do the same for you, Steve.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, that would be quite fun to do. I don't know about a particular style. I tend to run mixed arms lists generally. Try and get a little bit of everything in, no matter what I'm running. But some armies, it's easier to do that than others. Some have a really quite defined play style that it's difficult to break out of. I don't think I have a kind of standard style as such. I do these days have a very repetitious deployment style. So I build lists to deploy a certain way, which I will do across a lot of different armies, even though the armies look very different. Which is essentially, if I may go off on a tangent, a symmetrical deployment. So you have like a central component, which is kind of middle aligned. Then you have two identical flank components, and then so you will deploy your first 9, 10, 11, 12 drops, so they look exactly the same across your deployment zone. If you cut it down the middle and flip it, it's like a mirror. And so your opponent doesn't know which way you're committing to. And then you'll have 2, 3, whatever, another battle group or just separate units that can operate independently that then go down at the very end and commit which way you want to do, depending on what your opponent does. And it means you can also deploy 3/4 of your army in kind of, under a minute, because just go bam, 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 bam. You know where everything goes, and you're not wasting any time, and you don't care what your opponent's doing. So that is something that I try and replicate across a lot of, not every time, but within that you can still vary what you do, but that is something I do for most of my lists. I'm kind of mildly obsessed with it, as my local group would take the piss out of me for. But it's effective, and I don't see anybody else doing it beyond kind of like the first maybe 4 drops, 5 drops, something like that.
No,
so it's a really useful trick.
Well, and I do think that it allows that, that ability to cross lists and play different armies to occur when you've got that kind of thing in your head that just works for you.
Yeah,
I've said on the
here's your structure. Yeah, here's your structure, and go from there. Yeah,
I've said it on the cast a couple of times, but I mean, Tracy's a classic example, although he changes a bit. But there was a local Mike Crossman who was on the RC, and he had a particular style. He'd always have, say, an individual that was mounted that could cover his back line or act as a redirector when he needed, and you could read a list and go, yeah, that feels very Mike. Yeah. What about yourself, Steve?
I'm all over the place. It all depends what the theme of the army is. One minute I could deploy a complete cavalry list. But I was like playing like my Brother Mark army, which is all based on like Crusaders and Templars and stuff like that. And then next minute I've got like my Orc infantry list. So it's like whatever.
Yeah.
I've got no set way of setting up.
And then Chris, we've got a little shot from Steve Hildrew here. He couldn't resist.
What? From Steve?
Yeah.
No.
Just claiming the same Nurgle models as all 27 factions, count as playing them all.
Nah. I use them for 5 factions. Steve. Which, actually, to be fair, the Nurgle ones were a bit more of a stretch. So I took them to, I did a doubles tournament with them as undead. So I only had to field 1,000 points, and then I used them as Empire of Dust for an event as well. So they were the Empire of Pus, and they went to an ambush event for that, just because I was quite limited in what I could actually use them for. So if anything, the elves cosplayed as more different factions than the Nurgle stuff. So Steve is exaggerating.
No, that doesn't sound like Steve.
Not like Steve at all to take the mick. To be fair to him, he did actually lend me one of the armies. He lent me the Orcs. Was the first year, I think it was. So thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it greatly. You bastard.
Yeah. And then our next question is from Robert James. And he said, I think go for a controversial one to spice things up. Are there any lists you don't think should survive into 4th ed that just didn't feel like they added enough to a wider game? Steve, do you want to lead on this one?
Well, I'm happy with all the lists. I can't see a reason why we should drop any lists. Why not add some more?
Ophidia. Bring in
Ophidia. There's a few lists theme-wise that I think really need to be looked at. Ratkin slaves. But I can't see why there's always the drama about dropping lists. Why do we need to drop armies? I can't understand why we need to drop them. If people want to play them, then I think the only thing that might be the issue would be like for the rules committee. So, but how much?
I think that's generally the argument. You know,
but how much do they actually change each list? It's only when you do the big overhaul. Like they did with the Abyssals and the like when they done the Twilight Kin. Normally, most armies have one or two little tweaks done to them. So I can't see their problem. Why do we need to drop any? As long as people like playing.
I agree with Steve. I'm kind of a live and let live person. I think if you don't really need to be culling the factions, I think the more you have, there's more choice for people, and then you get more interesting stuff on the table, because then you get hobbyists like Steve who have all these great sandboxes to work with because they've got so many different options and they can be really creative and come up with really cool looking armies and different lists. I mean, I think there probably are some that, you know, as you say, kind of don't offer that much, you know, Herd, Orcs, Rordia, maybe. I think there's a bit of a kind of like niche Rordia fan group, but I think some of those factions, they're a little dull. But it doesn't necessarily mean you need to get rid of them. They're not doing any harm where they are. I mean, I think so disclaimer, I do know Rob very well. He's one of my local group. And so I would love to say get rid of Brother Mark, because I know that would make him weep. But anyone who knows Rob also knows that he's never ever going to get that Brother Mark army finished and on the table, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But actually, I did really enjoy Brother Mark. I played them, so I wouldn't want those to go. I think they're quite characterful too. But yeah, I don't really see the need to change.
And in the end, who really knows what we'll get? Because there'll probably be this back and forth between, you know, whatever Mantic decide they want. You know, who knows if Alessio digs his feet into the ground and says, "Nah, I don't want to design a game like that." You just don't know. I will back though.
Yeah, it's all speculation at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I do think we'll have your wish come true of some newer armies, though, Steve. I'm pretty confident in that. So, David Musgrave, why was Chris so bad with it? See, UK is similar to Australia, isn't it? It's all about tall poppy syndrome, Chris, isn't it? You know, they just have to bring the top down. You know, why was Chris so bad with Abyssal Dwarves? Not fast or mobile shooty enough for you? Genuinely, apart from the above, which lists do they both feel were the most fun to use, and which, if any, lacked the tools to be competitive? So, Chris, let's leave with you.
I'm sensing a theme with these questions here. It's a tough crowd. You can tell I'm really popular on the UK scene. So the Abyssal Dwarf list. So within all these rotations, I've taken some competitive armies, but I've also taken a lot of nonsense like that Spectre list I mentioned. And the Abyssal Dwarf list was I took a 675 point dragon.
I love that.
Because I wanted to make the most expensive unit in the history of Kings of War and get it on the table. And so it was a third of my army was in this Iron Caster on Ancient Half-Breed or whatever.
Did you take every spell? Yeah, right, yeah.
Every single spell and the Crystal Pendant and like the upgrade for the extra spellcaster level and things like that. And
brilliant.
Yeah. It was good. And he only ever cast Fireball, Heal and Surge anyway, so it was all a waste. I think he cast Lightning Bolt like once. It's a complete waste of time. But I didn't lose the game with that list. I drew twice and won one. But yeah, it didn't podium or anything, so it was a bit of a gimp list. But yeah, what was the question? Sorry.
No, yeah. Which were the most fun, and which list did you feel lacked the tools to be competitive?
You go, Steve. Well, I think. I'm not sure.
I like playing all of them. So, yeah, I mean, the only one that I've had any issues with, as I said earlier on, was Night Stalkers. I just cannot get my head around them. I just can't play them for some reason. So, but I wouldn't say I've got any favourites. All depends what I like it at the time. At the moment, up the last 6 months, it's been Orcs. I'm playing Orcs. I played Orcs consistently for about 6 months, just after I finished the challenge, and I've been loving playing. But now I've moved on to, as I said, Ratkin Slaves, so I'm enjoying them. So whatever army I take on, I enjoy. I said, if I can just get my head around Night Stalkers, you know what I mean? That's the one, the challenge, shall we say?
Next year. Yeah, for me, I think it's just, I enjoyed pretty much all of them as well. There were a couple which I didn't have as much fun with, I think, but I think it's partly just kind of what mood you're in that weekend, whether you enjoy it or not. I think I did really enjoy Ratkin Slaves. Ratkin Slaves, I think I would put up there as one that kind of surprised me with how fun they were. I would say Sylvankin's probably my favourite, but that was my favourite before I went on the spree. So I think Trident Realms were really good, enjoyed them. Salamanders were really fun. Halflings were really fun. Ones that kind of lack stuff? Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Did you find the Trident Realms quite hard to build a cohesive list that wasn't? I mean, I guess because you build in unilateral battle groups, maybe if you're building it more towards, an even list, maybe that's what works. But did you find it hard to really come to something that did it take you a lot of time list building to go, I think that'll work?
Yeah. I think Trident Realms was one I didn't really have much chance to practice, so I kind of just went with what I went with. And that was the previous year, so it had the old formation in, which was really good. And lots of individuals. Trident Realms, they are a weird one. I think that's why I quite enjoyed them, because I felt like I didn't really get as much control over them as some of the other factions. They're one I'd like to go back with, because a bit like Night Stalkers, a bit like Halflings, some of these other ones, Ratkin, they're not the easiest to pick up and play. In fact, they're probably one of the most difficult Trident Realms, because they are quite unique and they operate in a different way for everything else. So they were quite a challenge. But for me, I quite enjoy that. So I thought they were and they were a lot of fun. They have a lot of kind of different moving parts and little tricks you can play. And so they're quite an enjoyable army. It's just a shame. I really don't like the Mantic model range for Trident Realms. Otherwise, I'd probably kind of pick them up as an army to actually play in future. But yeah, they were a lot of fun though. I would say them.
Yeah, because for that it'll be them and Abyss for me that I'll be working on this year after I punch out some more halflings. But yeah, I think overall they feel more challenging to build a cohesive list for without just like spamming something, right? Yeah. What about for yourself, Steve? So question was, which were the most fun and which lacked the tools for you?
As I said, you know what I mean, I enjoy most of the armies. So EOD's always been one of my favourites. I was playing the mummy spam before it became popular. So I was playing that. I was playing the 3 regiments of mummies back in the day. So before they got all the new shenanigans. So and everybody seems to be taking them. So, but yeah, they've always been one of my favourite armies to play. And as I said, the last 6 months I was playing the Orcs, and they're so much fun. Loads and loads and loads of infantry. Turn 1, halfway across the table, and your opponent's go, "What?" Just to look, it's literally just look on your opponent's face. Just set them all up, and then get turn 1, and you get halfway across the table, and they're just stood there looking at you, going, "What do I do?" Because if you layer them right, you know what I mean, with the banner as well. Because I was running lots of infantry regiments and stuff like that. So more axe regiments, more axe troops with the banner. You can get them up to, I think I had them at one point up to an additional 9 attacks on each more axe troop. So you're getting
with the standard bearer and the rampage.
Yeah, the rampage aura is because there's no maximum to it, so it's just, and it counts troops as well. So it's troops, regiments, and hordes. So you stick a more axe troop in there, which is 15 attacks, not really. And you get them up. I think I set up to 9 additional attacks on one unit. So 24 attacks, and then you get someone in the flank as well. It's like, oh my! The look on your opponent's face is like, how many attacks? It's just fantastic.
when I've dabbled, because I was considering playing Riftforge Orcs, I think you get some good lists leaning into that as well in the Riftforge. Probably better, arguably, because they hit a bit harder. Yeah.
They're not proper orcs, are they, Reforged? They're just
yeah. They're the Master Orc, Steve. The new Master Race. So next question we've kind of touched on from John Paul Fuller Jackson. Is having 28 factions a strength or weakness for Kings of War? We didn't really touch on that bit. It's certainly better than just having 4, like some games, but at a certain point is more becoming less. And I guess what he's alluding to there is that, do some of them become a bit samey when you've got a tight rule set like Kings?
I think there's enough options in each of the armies that you know what I mean. You can make so many different lists out of. They're not all going to be hyper competitive, but you could even sit down as a sample, just the orcs. You can sit down and go a combined force. Next minute you can go an all infantry force. If you want to take it, you could take a whole mounted force or all fast force. So even with an army as simple as say the orcs, yeah, it's not going to be the most hyper competitive, but you can play it and have good fun playing it. So
yeah, I think again, more the merrier for me. I think more options is good, leads to more diversity of play. So I think it is a strength. I suppose if kind of put a different hat on, Steve and I do a lot of events. We play a good amount. If you're a new player starting the game, that can probably be quite intimidating. I mean, it's good that it's all in one place, so it's accessible like that, unlike some other games. And I think we would argue that, as you play, you begin to recognise the similarities across the different lists, and so that's it becomes easier to understand. But I suppose that could be quite intimidating for someone just starting out to see that many different factions, especially if they're coming from another game system where there's a lot of kind of shenanigans within each faction. That might be quite off-putting. But so there's that, I guess.
Yeah, and I would have said that maybe that sameness before they started refreshing was more exaggerated. But with the refreshing and trying to lean into a theme a bit more of armies like Northern Alliance or something like that, it's, I mean, some of it hasn't been necessarily done that well in the Clash of Kings, like Salamanders hasn't really added anything, to their list. But at 4th, if that was what they leaned into a bit more, I certainly don't think it would be a weakness moving forward. They just have to pick something that feels like a really good theme for each army and lean into it and then balance it.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, as the edition has evolved, there's kind of been more separation of the armies, and they've become a bit more unique. They've added a bit more flavour as we've gone on. Not always, as you say, getting it right, but generally that's a good thing. So I think the diversity is a strength.
From Steve Hildrew, which factions felt the most similar to play for each of you? Shall we start with you, Steve?
I don't know, really. It's because as I said, I theme a lot of my armies. Then I normally choose a theme for that army and then stick to it. So I haven't got a lot of armies I can do combined armies with a lot of my armies, but I don't normally play them that way. So
yeah, it's tricky to say, really, isn't it? Because I mean, for me as well, it's kind of varying the kind of styles of lists, different types of lists between the different factions, as well as changing factions. So, and also, stuff that you might think would be quite similar. So, League of Rordia, for example, and Kingdoms of Men, quite similar, right? One's the theme list, isn't it? So, but I ran a kind of mixed arms Rordia list and then an all alpha with 3 giants Kingdoms of Men list. So very, very different. Like the Kingdoms of Men one was more similar to the Green Lady one, which was an alpha build as well. But Green Lady and Kingdoms of Men, if you look at their faction roster, aren't that similar. So it's difficult to say, really. I think it's just personal preference and how you build them. So it's tricky. I'm not sure if we give a good answer for that one, Steve. Not that I really care, but that's. I just went with what I thought was most fun. So I don't know if there was I was looking for similarities for the factions. I think some do lean into very obvious styles, and there might be similarities there. Particular armies, Empire of Dust, for example, dwarfs, things like this are very attritional, and so you'd have a similar style there, but they do it in different ways. So
yeah, Abyssal Dwarves do it better.
Abyssal Dwarfs do really well. Do like Abyssal Dwarfs. They're very strong at the moment.
Yeah. From Steve Hildrew to Steve Evans, you've modelled every army. How big is your house? And more seriously, which is your favourite to play and what are your favourite models? How many of them are Mantic? And are you insane?
Answer to the last question, yes, completely, Natalie. My house isn't that big. I've actually downgraded. You know what I mean? So we live in a little 3-bedroom terrace house. So yeah, I've got a very big house. So, and what was the other things Mr. Hildred wanted to know?
So, how many of the armies are Mantic? Probably is the bit worth touching on.
Quite a few actually. I think I've got at least 10, maybe 12 armies that I could run completely Mantic. So yeah, I've got no issues with the Mantic ranges. There's not a lot of the models I would say I don't like. It's just some of the lines I've gone down because I figured that I really like that, so I could build an army around that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's got to be at least 10, 12. It might be more than that. So yeah, I think that especially with their newer ranges, though I'm going to be one of those really strange people. I do like the old Mantic elves. I have a very large old Mantic elf army that I really like. So yeah, I've got no issues with them. Dwarf army, Abyss Dwarf army, as well. Northern Alliance. That's all Mantic. Yeah, the majority of them I can think of. Yeah.
From General Gaddafi, if you guys could change one thing about Kings of War, what would it be?
You touched on the unlock system earlier, Matt. That probably needs a refresh.
Yeah, that would be.
I would.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there, Chris. You know what I mean? Literally,
there's quite a few ways you can limit some of the more abusive stuff if they kind of refresh the unlock system. But overall, not a huge amount. I mean, I could rattle off a long list probably of all the different units that need a slight balance tweak, points or ability change or whatever, and complain about all the different factions on that front. But overall, I don't think I'd change a whole lot. I mean, I really enjoy the game. So I suppose I'd like more people to play it. I wish it were even popular. That's what I would change.
Obviously, around the theme line as well, like also what you're saying there is like you get a situation where how many generals is there in the Empire Army in the Kingdoms of Men? How many of them have got lion beasts, for example?
Exactly.
So it always does
breeding them by the barrel.
How many dwarf lords is there to lead one tiny little dwarf army, which is probably like, and how many of them have got beasts to ride on? So
why are there more snow troll primes than there are snow trolls?
Yeah.
Things like that I think if anything that would be the one thing that I would like to see changed on. Not the actual standard rules. I love the rules as they are. If anything, I'd like them to stop fiddling around with the rules so much. Command dice, and concentrate on tweaking the lists and stuff like that. So, in the sense of like, you know, I think they did it back in the old Warhammer days where you had to buy something to be able to unlock something, and there was limitations on certain things that you could only have such and such and things. You had an army general, so there was one person that was in command. I haven't got a problem if they changed it slightly. So yes, for example, Kingdoms of Men, generals on winged beast, you can have one. Heroes on winged beast, you can have how many you want, but you can only have the one general on winged beast because he is the general. He leads the army.
We were talking about kind of culling factions and things like that. There's probably something they could do around having, and this is not my idea. I've seen this elsewhere. You know, specific heroes which then unlock certain things. So then you, as Steve's saying, you have one of one type of something rather than three. But then that allows you to do, you know, unlock certain specific things, which then themes the armies in different ways. And then you could probably cull down to kind of one human army or something like that, from which you could get a Brother Mark or a Rordier or whatever, depending on a bit like they have with Noble Undead, but more of that. So that might be an option.
Well, you mentioned, Chris, you'd like more people to play. Why don't you think they do? I mean, realistically, at face value, other than Clash of Kings as a tournament in the UK, I don't feel like it's not a hugely growing game. So if there was anything that stopped it growing, say, beyond having a storefront, What do you think it is that stops it?
That's the problem, isn't it? It's never going to grow up. It's never going to do well against like GW. And we should stop even thinking about, worrying about what GW do.
Yeah, it's not the same
Do you think that's the case, though? Because, like, objectively, something like Conquest seems to grow a lot faster.
Does it, though?
I'm not here. I don't know anyone who plays that. Now, maybe just a kind of regional thing, and I'm sure it's different in America and Spain and France and wherever else play different games will surface the top. Like, why has Kings of War got a really good scene thriving in Poland, for example, but a much more limited scene, in other European countries? It's just. I don't know. I don't know is the honest answer. If I did, then I'd be a businessman making money from noticing gaps in the market and growing my business.
Look on YouTube, look on Facebook, and every other post in the miniature game is something to do with GW, isn't it? Even if it's not good things to do with GW, it's bad things to do with GW. It's every YouTube video you watch on YouTube that's got GW involved is 20 million views or whatever, that up to something like Kings of War. You're lucky if you get like a couple of hundred views. You know what I mean? Is people are just drawn towards Games Workshop.
You can make that argument, though, but any other industry that's like that then becomes ripe for disruption, and often there is someone that very successfully does so. So I just wonder if there's anything in the game itself that stops it from being a real growth game.
I don't think so. I don't think there's. I think most people that come over to playing Kings of War stick to Kings of War. I don't think a lot go back to playing Old World or went back to playing Old World and stuff like that. I think a lot of people that once you start playing the Mantic games, you play them, but it's about when you get games in. And over in this country, we're quite lucky. A lot of us have gaming clubs. And as I said, like my gaming club, for example, I could have a game. I got a game of Midgard tomorrow. I've got a game of Sharp Practice next week. I've got a game of Kings of War the week after. There's plenty of different games that I could be playing. You know what I mean? But a lot of these other countries don't have gaming clubs like we call gaming clubs, like in village halls or scout huts and stuff like that. A lot of them play in store. And the store is obviously only going to keep what they're going to make money on. And they're not going to make money on the Mantics and that's... They'll make money on the popular things. And that's what they see.
And now that Mantic has switched to going down the 3D printed route, which I don't think is a bad decision kind of business-wise for them, then that's going to make it even less likely that you're going to have stores that are carrying the product unless they're printing stuff themselves. I mean, I would say, I think we've got to recognise it is still a niche. It's still a niche system. But then actually, when we do, particularly when you go to like tournaments which are hosted at, little mini conventions and kind of where other stuff is going on. So Kings of War these days is quite
in this country.
It's good. It is like good. The tournaments that are going on at these kind of like at Warfare, for example, we had 40 plus people, and it was I think the biggest tournament. And that's with a whole load of other kind of historical systems and different. Age of Sigmar didn't turn up. I think I'm not sure, but like it actually does reasonably well. So I don't think we're in a bad place, but I think we have to just accept that, we're in a kind of a different situation to where GW are.
You know what I mean? You look at some of the events they have over in America for like the 40Ks and stuff like that. You're talking like over 1,000 competitors. You know what I mean?
But I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like we know each other. Like it's nice. It's a nice, friendly scene. I would like it. It's nice to expand a bit, but there's probably not, too much, because then it starts to become. You start to lose that connection with the rest of the community if they become too many people. And when everyone knows everyone, I think that makes for a much kind of friendlier, much nicer, much cleaner gaming scene as a result. So yeah, that's good. Anyway, gone off on a massive tangent there.
A friendlier scene where people can ask 6 questions that are essentially taking the piss out of you, Chris.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
So from Squirm and Vermin, which army was the most challenging to figure out? Which one was the easiest? I think, Steve, for you said Night Stalkers was the hardest. But
easiest, orcs.
Yep. And what about for you,
March.
Chris?
Yeah, orcs are pretty straightforward. I think, I mean, I kind of covered it. Trine realms are quite tricky. I think halflings are pretty tricky to pick up. I think, but the good thing about halflings is that it's really hard to kind of work out what they do, but also most people who you play against can't really work out what you do. So I played you with the halflings, didn't I, Steve?
Yeah, you did.
We played, was it? Yeah, it was prior to the show, wasn't it? Yeah. So I made loads of mistakes that tournament, but all my opponents made more mistakes against me because they just couldn't work out what my stuff was doing. So it wasn't particularly high quality Kings of War, but it still worked because they're just a tricky army to understand. So they were a tough one. They're an army. I actually have a load of halflings sitting in boxes that I want to get to after the Night Stalkers because I think they're a really fun one as well. But they are quite challenging.
I agree with that.
So fair play to the chat. Fair play to Radek, who won Masters this year with halflings. We didn't get to play, unfortunately, but So
I find them hard to feel like you've written the list you really want to write, and that you're confident as you hit the table that this all synergizes well. I totally agree, but they are quite fun. Chet Dudek had said, "How do you find the time to play all 28?" But we've covered that. Then from Mark Zielinski. This is probably more for you, Steve, than Chris with his 28 version of Nurgle. Do you, according to Steve Ildrew, do you have the same amount of points for each faction? If so, how many? And if not, how many points for the lowest faction?
I've got a few that are up and around the 6,000-7,000. So I've got my Orcs, Basilians, and Abyssal Dwarves. And then I think my lowest one's it's about 2,500. So she's probably like Trident Realms, Ratkin, Northern Alliance, and then all in between then, really. So, and I'm always adding as I find models, because an army's never finished. Don't matter what anybody says, an army's never finished. You always find something to add to the force. I'll see a model, I'll just add it to it.
When you're starting, Steve, do you build to a list then, actually? I've never asked you this. Or do you just kind of... So you do have a list in mind when you start out, and then once you've got there, you just go off on random digressions to what you want to paint?
I mean, for example, the Brother Mark is a classic example. I really wanted to use... who was it? I'm trying to remember who it is. It was one of the companies that do like the Knights, the new Knights, Das Vault. I think it was that company. Anyway, I bought some in Knights. I really liked them. And the next minute, I just wanted to do a Brother Mark Templar army. So literally, I just went out and designed a list, all with mounted knights, mounted characters, dragon, and I collected that army. And then after I collected that army, then I went back and started. I want a unit of Monster Hunter infantry. I want a unit of spearmen. I want a unit of blah, 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 and then added it to it. But normally I start off with a set list that I've got in mind. And then once that list is built, the classic with it, again, with the zombies was another classic example. I always wanted, who's the chap that plays zombies over here a lot? Oh, I can't remember.
Andrew Morley. Yeah. With his all zombie list. Yeah, love that army.
And I've got to do that. So, and they brought out the formation. This was the time when they brought out the formation as well. The one with the 2 zombie legions and the gore blight. So I've got to do that. Fun. So I just collected up as many different zombie models as I could find. So I got zombie bears, zombie pigs, zombie children, zombie everything. And it was like literally, I was just making. So I made a legion, a regiment, a horde, a troll horde, and a gore blight themed. So I done one like farmyard themed, one woodland themed, and what was the other one? Can't remember the other one. But I done like 3 different themes. So I built that, so I can now field a whole zombie army. So, but I've added on to it since, So again, once the theme's done, I'll normally stick to that army, do it to a certain level, and then I'll probably go off and do something else. And then as I get other units in, as I buy other stuff in or get my hands on other stuff, then I'll start adding it to it. Keeps the painting interesting as well. So you're not painting. You've got a project on the go, but then, as I said in a moment, I'm painting up an army for Midgard, but I've also got a couple of other bits and pieces on the table. So as I'm doing that, I'll get a bit bored painting them, or I'll just do an hour on this one, and I'll go back to doing whatever. So it's that little bit of variation. So.
And Chris, it sounds like with building an army, you're not dissimilar in that you like to paint larger points.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I just paint. Yeah, I just paint. I just paint and paint and paint, and then worry about the list once I've got loads. So when I started out playing, I just kind of played what I had, and then kind of gradually built out the elf collection, and that's what I'll do with the Night Stalkers as well. So yeah, don't build to a list. Just kind of build and paint what I enjoy, and then work backwards from that.
And then from Daniel TJ Haslam, is there any, I mean, he says stereotype, but really it's a unit type. Would you always select, was there a unit type that you would select in every army? So, for example, a hero with wings or a phalanx horde, or was there anything you found yourself just putting in every army?
No, I don't think so. I think this is quite an interesting question. I'm not sure there was kind of one type of unit. I think there are certain types of units which are good in any army. So most armies, you'll always have like a piece or two of fast chaff, your Ger Panthers, your Snow Foxes, things like this. And then anything which is like, your Ogre hero type unit. So Snow Troll Primes is a good example, Ratkin, Brute Enforcers, things like this. Those are all really, so if there's an opportunity to take something like that, I'm taking it, but not. I don't know if there was something I was always looking for. Usually but like I said, I'm kind of usually trying to find a bit of everything. So a bit of speed, bit of shooting, bit of punch, bit of absorption. And so there's your standard hammers and anvils and things like that, but it's not always the same. So I don't think I can give an answer. It is an interesting one to think about. I'd have to kind of like go through all the lists I ran, but line by line to try and work it out. But I don't think so.
Definitely not for me. Definitely not for me. I've said if it fits into the theme, it goes in the list. I don't care if it's good or not. If it fits into the theme of the army I want to play, then I'll play it. So
yeah. I mean, like as I said earlier, there's a similar structure to a lot of the lists I build. But so, for example, that center could be, I said I would have like a central component that could be. I think Masters had 3 hordes of ice elementals, but it could also be a night horde. It's just one thing that goes in, or it could be 2 hordes of phalanx, or it could be, it's different things. 2 glade stalkers and a couple of air elementals behind them. It's a very different type of unit. Yes, it's the central component that the rest of the army works around, but it's not. It's not the same type of thing every time.
It's the idea that's the same rather than the unit type. Yeah. The strategy is the same rather than the structure.
The structure, the kind of the foundation of how the
Yeah, okay. And then tongue-in-cheek question from Tom Annis. We covered this off air, Steve, but he said, how many kids do you have for both of you? And Steve, obviously yours are grown up and gone, and I think Chris, you've just got animal kids, don't you?
I've got a couple of dogs, who get left with someone when I'm away for the weekend if the wife's not around to look after them. So no, none, and that probably explains why I'm not to attend so many tournaments.
Yeah. From Paige Neo, we kind of covered this, but I mean, Steve, we won't start you off on Ratkin Slaves, but do you feel like every faction does have their unique identity at the moment? So obviously there's that couple that don't, but do you think in general most of the armies do?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can. I mean, the only issue I've got with the Ratkin Slaves is not that they're not.
Here we go.
Not decent army or anything like that. But for a start, they shouldn't be called Ratkin Slaves, in my eyes. Because the actual
Ratkin People's Liberation
Front. Well, it's the Abyssal Dwarves, isn't it? The Abyssal Dwarves are the slave masters, so it should be called like the Abyssal Dwarf Slavers or something like that, or for example. So you know what I mean?
I actually quite like the background for the Ratkin Slaves.
Exactly, I love the background. I love it. It's just the actual. There's certain bits about it that you know what I mean. It's like I always like the idea of going around more of the Xerxes type of style. So why that's another thing that irks me at the moment is the Abyssal Dwarf formation. That should never be in the Abyssal. It's a great formation. Everybody loves it, but in my eyes, that should never be in. That should be in the Ratkin slave list because it should be a slaver list. So all the slaves the Abyssal Dwarves have should be in one list. The orcs should be in that list. The orc slaves should be in that list. So. And the Ratkin should be in that list, and then you just have the dwarves as the slave masters, in my eyes. So, but
Yeah, a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, it is a bit of a weird one. It is a bit of a weird one. And I again with the Abyssal Dwarves, it irks me that on a lot of the other formations they've used the box sets, the new ambush box sets, as the new formations, which I think is an absolutely fantastic idea. Some of the new formations they've come out with are brilliant. The Northern Alliance one, I love the Northern Alliance. The Goblin one, that seems to be very, very popular now. But with the Abyssal Dwarves, they've got this orc.
Crappy slave model.
Orc. And again, I'm not saying it in a great formation. The actual rules for it, and it's brilliant. It's, you know what I mean? It is but it just doesn't fit. As you can probably tell, I like the theme. I like the theme of the art, and it just, in my eyes, it just does not fit in the theme of the army. So, right, over to you, Chris. Shut up, mate.
Rant over. Therapy session ended. Yeah. Unique identity. I think most of them have a unique identity. I think there are a few which I find a bit bland. Forces of Nature I find really bland. I don't think they do anything interesting. Green Lady's much more interesting lore-wise. So are Sylvan-Kin. I find Force of Nature a bit dull. You could cull them if you want. Like, they could split and their bits could go into all the different, they got Salamanders, they got Trident Realm, they got Sylvan-Kin stuff. They've got, lots of things that could go elsewhere.
I don't mind the idea of Forces of Nature, but you just can't do it without doing, the unlock system as it stands doesn't work in Forces of Nature very well, I don't think.
It's weird.
I'd like to see it just as an elemental list.
I mean, you can do it. I just don't think it'd be that great.
But I think, but also the thing is with identity, there's kind of different levels to it. It's identity on the table and identity in the background. So and some factions have a much clearer identity, like dwarfs or orcs have a very clear identity. But for me, no offense, Steve, I know you've been opining on how much you love the orcs, but that doesn't necessarily translate for me for a fun army on the table. Like, I found those two less enjoyable to play, but they do have a clear identity. So identity doesn't always mean that that's actually a great faction as an overall package. You can have it in two ways. But yeah, mostly I think the factions kind of like, they have something that's appealing, which kind of draws people to them.
People like different things,
but there's a couple in there.
When it comes down to it, people like different things. So, you know what I mean? If everything was like completely the same, everybody would be playing the same army, but people aren't. You know what I mean? You go to a tournament.
Exactly, and that goes back to having the kind of the kind of diversity of options and the many multiple factions, because then you have something for everyone, if you like.
I think,
in theory,
I think the last tournament I went to, there probably were about 20 factions. 20 factions in play. So,
which one was that?
I think, what was the last one I went to? It's going to let me thinking now. Hinkley Heist.
Out of how many people?
24. So it must be about 18 factions, I reckon.
Oh wow, that's pretty good. Yeah,
I think it was
not much
approximately 18 factions out of the 28. I think they had 24 to 26 players. So I don't think there was very many duplicates of armies, so which is nice to see. It gives people a variety of things to play.
Absolutely, yep. And so, apologies to Bill Hupp, Jason Murray, and we're going to skip over those because I think we've answered them elsewhere. Marshall Temple, what do you think the bottom 5 factions are? But maybe we'll just tweak that to bottom 3. And how would you fix them?
For me, I think we've already mentioned it. Orcs. They can do a few different things, but it's quite straightforward. There's not a lot of tricks you can play. There's not a lot of different ways to catch people out or to kind of catch people by surprise or do things differently. So I think they're and also they are more limited. They tend to be very infantry based most of the time, which I think against. When other factions have so many kind of fast things or grindy things or shooty things, it can make it quite challenging when you're a bit one-dimensional. Herd, I think, are also pretty... I think for me, I don't know about bottom 3, but for me, those two feel like they're a bit cut adrift from everyone else, because Herd... Actually, there was kind of questions about which ones you liked and stuff like that. I found Herd really disappointing. I thought I was expecting them to be a lot more fun because they're in theory they're very fast and mobile, lots of nimble. But actually, I still found that quite one-dimensional. There wasn't as much to it as I was expecting.
Do you play a heavy Lycan list?
No, I didn't. It was the Spirit Walkers, so I hoarded them. I had like Avatar of the Father, I had Moonfang, the Chieftain with the Wild Charge, or I had some Centaurs and Flaxhoof, a couple of Scorchwings, a couple of Harpies. That was roughly that, I think. But I think it was more kind of hit you in the face than anything else without that much else to do, and so I found it a bit underwhelming.
They're a bit.
Yeah, they are. Which is okay. Like, it's fine, Abyssals can be quite glass hammer as well sometimes. And there are other factions which are like that as well. You can get a lot of, Northern Alliance have their half-elf berserkers, which are pretty good. They're, again, Defense 3, they go down Fool and Pyrons. These things can go down quite quickly. So it's not so much that. It's just, I just found them a bit underwhelming. And I think they do suffer, particularly against shooting, obviously, because they're so lightweight. And I think for me, the weakest ones are the ones that lack that diversity of options to play, because the more different types of things you can do on the table, you've got more ways to kind of work against what you're up against, and also to undo what you're up against, and to play around that. And I think when you're quite the flip side, I say that, but the flip side of that is you got dwarfs who are incredibly one-dimensional, but their one dimension is also incredibly powerful. So it's not that they can kind of get away with it. But I think Orcs and Herd probably are the weakest two. I'm not sure about the third one, because a lot of factions which people think of as being quite weak. So we mentioned Ratkin Slaves. I mentioned Brothermark earlier. Kingdoms of Men. These are factions which a lot of people go, but actually I think they're quite good. So I don't think that's a fair.
In the hands of a good player, you know what I mean. Any factions can work, but there are certain ones that you'll find easier to work with. So
yeah.
So I played the heavier Lycanus styled herd list. I found them so much glass. They were quick as anything, but if you didn't take that unit out when you hit it, you were in a whole heap of trouble. So.
But you see, something like elves are like that as well. They're quite glass hammer. Even dracons, you throw them into a big combat. If you don't break it and reform, you're toast. And that's an expensive unit to combat. But they've got other options that to kind of work around that with the different good infantry and good shooting and mobile shooting and, mobile characters, good individuals. If you do Sylvan King, you got surge options. Yeah, it's just different.
Elves also have the built-in insurance policy of elite a little bit. So compared to
that does help.
Compared to something like the herd.
I wonder if it's just a matter of
it's true.
If it's just the armies that aren't used a lot that we perceive as being weak because not a lot of people use them. So
because
if more people use them, if more people practice with them, if more people played with them, would that actual list be as bad as people think it is?
Yeah, and you might get more of a kind of community effort then towards building a strong list, because some factions have a very kind of clear, again, I keep banging on about dwarfs. Sorry, dwarfs, and all who play dwarfs. I don't like you. But, you see the dwarf formation in every list, and there's a reason why it's very, very good, and people have collectively come to that conclusion. And so you see Golak, you see Faber, and if you had a lot of people playing the herd, a lot of people playing orcs, then you might refine down to. I'm not encouraging everyone to net list, but you might get as a collective more towards a kind of build that is quite strong. Whereas at the moment, because not that many people run them, there's not a lot of kind of evidence there to support people into finding a good. And we're talking competitively here. Of course, you can run whatever you like, and it can be fun, but. To find that kind of slightly stronger build. But for me, it wasn't so much that they couldn't do a competitive build. It was more that I just found them quite one-dimensional, quite boring to play. And so that's why. But I also think they're on the lower end of the curve.
To be competitive with either of those lists, I think there is only one way you can play them if you want to be competitive.
So Chris, for you, it was orcs
and herd. I didn't give you a third. I don't know is the answer for the third one.
Okay.
I think those two are clearly worse than everyone else. And then you could make a case for a lot of others that are kind of at the lower end. But no, I think it's those two for me.
And would you pick anything else, Steve, or you kind of agree?
No. I said I probably agree with Chris there. I mean, I think those lists can be good lists, but there's to be competitive. They're one dimensional. You know, I mean, you can play them different ways, but you're not going to do, you know what I mean, well with them. I've always played my orcs. Whenever I played my orcs, as I do now, I can give people a good game. I can be, you know what I mean. But as soon as you start mucking around trying all cavalry lists or putting in lots of this or it just doesn't work. It only works competitively a certain way, and I think the herd's exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think with orcs, what you get with the difference with Riftforge that makes them probably slightly better is you get that faster hitting option. Right?
No,
Chris? The whatever the flying guys are called. You know, you get those options that you don't get in your orcs list. Then Scott Salee said, what army is the easiest to learn or play, and conversely, what is the most complex to play? I think, Chris, you've touched on complexity a little bit.
Yeah, we kind of covered that a bit earlier. I mean, I think most of them are pretty easy to pick up and play. Or not easy, but like they can be, you can get up to kind of, 70, 80, 90% capacity pretty quickly with most factions. I think, getting that.
I think it's the ones with the special. I think it's the ones with the real specialist rules in stuff like with shambling and stuff like that. That's where that's the more difficult ones. But the rest of them
can be tricky.
I mean, you can. When you got those
I think to get.
Sorry, Karen, Chris.
No, so I was going to say, I think to get that extra kind of 10% or 20% or whatever, that's where you need the kind of the repetitions and getting lots of tournaments in with the same list. But most of them are quite straightforward to pick. I think, as you say, things like which have a lot of special rules. So Twilight Kin, perhaps Halflings, Ratkin. Ratkin, there's a lot of intricacies of the way Ratkin kind of connects with each other. We mentioned Night Stalkers can be quite tricky. Trident Realms can be quite tricky. So those ones are the kind of the more challenging ones, I think. The easier ones are Orcs are pretty straightforward. Yeah, they're not too bad. Dwarfs pretty straightforward.
Ogres are without a doubt. When people ask me, what should I start with? I quite often say ogres is a good way to start.
Yeah.
Because not only is it, they're decent, they're a good list, they're also really easy to collect and over. Financially.
They're the quintessential beginner's army, aren't they? Ogres. They tick all the boxes.
You get a bit of everything, and they're easy to paint, they're easy to play. Mantic now with the newer models as well. They're lovely. The new plastic kits. They're lovely models. So they're one of the best ones.
They're a very good one. I think one other army I'd kind of recommend if you're kind of beginning is Northern Alliance. I think they're really, really strong to start with. They're one of the strongest factions, but they also have just a lot. Again, they're just stacked with a very internally competitive roster. Like there's a lot of good units that can do a lot of different things. And not too tricky to pick up. There is some kind of stuff around the applying the frozen and things like that, but that's so easy to do. It's not difficult, and I think they're a really good army to kind of to start out with to get a really competitive army that's also fun because it has a lot of different options. So that's a good one. I don't know about easy to start out with, but it's a good one. Yeah.
Okay. And then from John Guns, did you find that some armies were a bit rock, paper, scissors against certain builds, either gaining advantage or losing out? Steve, should we start with you?
Not really, to be honest. Again, it all depends how you design the list, isn't it? Because there's so many of the factions. You can design anything from, combined arms, heavy shooting, all elite, hit you in the face, alpha strike. So with most of it just depends on what you've designed and what you come up against. So
yeah, I don't think any faction demands that you go that kind of skewed way, if you like. I think there is an element of rock, paper, scissors in the game, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that keeps things interesting. So you're never going to have one type of list that's dominating, and the meta will kind of evolve and revolve as kind of different things rise and fall with the updates, but also if people are running a particular type a lot, then people will start to run the counter and so on and so forth. But I think there is an element of rock, paper, scissors when people skew and when they spam stuff. But that's not that common, to be honest. Everyone kind of complains about. We talked about the unlocks earlier to kind of deal with that, but a lot of people kind of complain about spam. It's not that common. There's a few people on the scene. There's a certain type of player who likes to spam, and all power to them. But it's a minority. It's not really an issue. And for me, kind of, I tend to run kind of mixed lists. So if I do come up against something, and the reason I do this is if I do come up against something that's skewed, that is more kind of rock, paper, scissors type build, then you at least have some counters within the list somewhere to deal with it. And you might be at a disadvantage, but it's not so overwhelming that it can't be overcome. So I think John, I know John's posted about this before. I think I've spoken to him about it before. He feels like the game is kind of drifting that way a little bit, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with him. I think it's always been an element of rock, paper, scissors, and it's there, but it's not too bad at the moment. I think the bigger problem is not problem, but I think what might be causing his concern is the fact that there's quite a lot of units in the game that now do their job too well. So there's less of a way to counter something being really effective. And like when you have things like the new Blood of the Old King item where you're giving stuff elite and vicious, so they're definitely going to kill something on that charge. It takes out some of the kind of the counter plays, I think. So there's a bit of that, a bit more of that, but the rock, paper, scissors specifically, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I don't think that's a larger problem. Like you say, you get some things that do it too well, like the old Soul Reavers, right? How many nerfs did they have to take over the years because they did their job too well? We'll see that balance out. All right, and then Chris, you kindly put the questions to your local gaming group too. So from Jake, how much did you try to weld each army into your preferred playing style versus how the army typically plays? So, I mean, we've kind of touched on the first half, Chris, and that you have a reasonably specific style, but did you try and vary it somewhat towards what the army seemed to do well?
Not necessarily what did well, but kind of what I wanted. What I kind of wanted to try out with this. So I wasn't always kind of building, in fact, quite rarely building what I thought was the most competitive list out of these factions, partly because I didn't want to, partly because I was restricted by what models someone might have. So I wasn't really going down that route. I think in terms of I think even if it's subconscious, you do try and make the army play in a way that suits you. Everyone has their own kind of preferences. But I think quite a lot, as I said earlier, quite a lot of the armies are that they naturally lean towards a particular style. And so you do, even if you're trying to vary that a bit, you still get led down the fact that you're going to have some chunky defense 6 dwarfs or, and actually, to be fair, quite a lot of the time, or not a lot of the time, probably 2, 3, maybe 4 of the armies that I took, I deliberately asked a specific player if I could run their list. So, for example, Danny, we had Danny taking the piss out of me earlier. Like I borrowed a friend Rob's dwarfs, but I ran the list very similar with a few tweaks to how I played against Danny's particular build because I thought it was quite interesting and I wanted to try it out. So there was a bit of that as well. So sometimes I was consciously taking something which I'd seen before. That was a minority, a small minority, but it was still, more than, I'd say maybe 3 times or something I did that. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about a particular play style. As I said, I had kind of similar set deployments, and I don't think that particularly changed towards the end. I think, I don't think the whole process made me change massively, like what I was doing each time. But there's an element of kind of trying to make things fit, but it's tricky. Sorry, that's a terrible answer, Jake. I should have thought more about your question, seeing as you asked me this like a month ago. Go for it, Steve. If you had anything else to add on top of that mess.
Well, as I said before, I basically just build the army around the theme of the army, so I don't really weld anything into anywhere play. It's just if that army fits the theme, how I think it should look, then I'll play it that way. So. If I want to run a hall-mounted army, then I'll run a hall-mounted army and take the consequences, shall we say? So, you know what I mean? As I said, I'm not a highly competitive player. I like to win, as everybody likes to win, but I'm much more interested in the collecting and the modelling aspect than the actual winning of tournaments and as such. The community,
believe it or not, me too.
Playing and the gaming.
No one believes it, Chris. No one believes it. What I want to know from Chris is that his local hobby club has terrain on the table changed into Masters.
oh, dearie me.
You know what? So yeah, no, that post did come straight after Masters, didn't it? I think that was actually that specific terrain was to my advantage. Yeah. The two cross, the diagonally cross thing. The terrain that screwed me at Masters was there when I played against Tom, and there was a hill the size of Kilimanjaro in the middle of the table, and my shooty army up against his ice elementals up against his undead with 31 surge, so freezes useless, and his veil of shadows with the giant hill in the middle of the table, so everything was hitting on sixes. Was just a nightmare. Yeah. The two pieces of block, but in all seriousness though, that comment I put on Fanatics about the two pieces of blocking, I would like to see tournaments switch away from that, because I do think when you have two large chunky bits of blocking diagonally across from each other, kind of maybe a kind of quarter to a third of the way in, it does lead to a lot of funneling of games. And for me at Masters, that was actually to my advantage a couple of times, because I had ice naiads, I had those elementals, as I said, and so I was able to kind of corral, particularly when I played Pete Wrench in the second game, and also Florence to some extent in the first game, when she had a lot of shooting. Pete had a lot of alpha, and I could kind of funnel them into where I wanted. So that was good for me. But I think the game gets a little bit stale when so many of the maps are like that. Yeah. And it's not knocking Bob, who did the maps, because he did a brilliant job at Masters this year. Actually, it was probably the most well-run one I've been to.
Yeah, because I think over the years, with it being a tournament game, it's fallen into that like Epic Dwarf style map of super symmetrical. The blackjack maps, when they were done, were deliberately designed to be less symmetrical, but they've still got the two of everything. I'd love to see tournaments move towards being more asymmetrical in terms of terrain, in terms of varying the amount of pieces and things. And, people would have to take that into account in list building, right? What happens if I come up on a table where there's 3 forests? I mean, it's hard when you do have whole armies that have Pathfinder.
But that's just matchup luck is a factor anyway. Yeah. And so I went to a tournament a couple of weeks ago down in Plymouth, and that was, Tom Farley, shout out to him, really good event down there, Plymouth Pirates. And he had some tables which had like 4 or 5 walls on them. And you don't see that very often, but I don't mind that, because it presents a different challenge that you're not used to. And so it's good to kind of mix that up. And I think we've got into a bit of a stalemate where everything's kind of 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, and that those blocking pieces I think are particularly problematic. But it applies to anything else. It would be good to kind of, as you say, 3 or 4 forests and then no blocking, or 4 blocking, okay, but just for one game, and then the others it's like 1 or something like that. So,
I totally agree.
Yeah, mix it up would be a good
because I think over time, when you've got that symmetry too, it takes away that first roll. Really, makes it less. Who cares what side you pick if it's symmetrical? Do you know what I mean?
I roll the dice, and wherever I'm sat, I'm like, well, I'm not moving.
That's how I roll too, Steve. Like, oh man, the army's half out. I'm staying here.
I'm sat at the table. I'm sat in place. I ain't moving.
Yeah. And I think a question from Richard, Chris, which is probably more directed to yourself, given Steve doesn't borrow armies. Which armies borrowed made you want to do your own version?
Well, actually, Richard's army, I borrowed his Ratkin, which was an incredibly effective, really nasty build, which I won't share because other people start copying it. But it was, I really enjoyed the Ratkin. The problem with Ratkin is a bit like the Trident Realms. I just don't really like the model range for Mantic, but I would like to play them more often. I think they're a really fun list. What other ones? But I borrowed halflings, and I will be building my own halflings army. As I said, I've already got a load of stuff in the drawer. So that's definitely one.
I've been working on it as we've been going.
Salamanders was great. Yeah, I thought I could see your head dipping down, Pace. That looks really cool, actually. I like that. That's really fun basing. But so a lot of them. Salamanders I really enjoyed. Empire. Yeah, I'd like to do more Empire of Dust. There's a lot of different ones that are, and actually I've got some Empire of Dust stuff now as well. I will. That's the back end of the queue. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of them. And as Steve said, like he enjoyed, pretty much all of it. I found every time I played something, I was like, oh, I'd love to collect, with the exception of Herd and Orcs, I'd love to collect this. I'd love to do this myself. So it's a lot of them. A lot of them were really appealing.
I don't want to see Empire of Dust in Chris Lynch's hands. That's for sure. That's
I might take it to a tournament soon.
Very,
actually,
very tough
I'm just trying to divvy up. Yeah, they're horrible. They're horrible. I think I want to take them more just so because like I said, I only did them for ambush myself, and because they are so nasty at the moment, it'd just be useful to. Best way to learn how to deal with a faction is to play it yourself, because then you work out you can see it from the other side and you can see where the weaknesses are. So I kind of want to take them myself just so I have a better gauge of just how filthy they are.
I love Empire of Dust, but I can't play them at the moment because everybody else is playing them. So I mean, I can't do it.
They're really good, and the change to the casket just made them so much better.
It's I've already given my opinion.
I was playing Mummy Spam before it was popular.
Yeah.
Steve.
And just almost every living legend is the most efficiently pointed legend in the whole game.
Yeah.
Out of all the lists, it's like, so there's that Snorf there, there's Idolish back, there's a monolith, right? So now we've got to build a list around it.
Well, actually, that comes to the next question from Matt, is ask them why EOD have been buffed so hard and what the secret agenda is.
I think Matt again. He's as I said, this is my local group, and he does a lot of UB, so I think he keeps running up against EOD on that and is sick of the sight of them. But he shouldn't complain because he runs Northern Alliance. They are equally filthy. They are. They're just pretty rank at the moment, I think. And I said this. I'm pretty sure I said this when I was on last time, Matt. I really think that scouting change was a massive, massive error. I just think I get why. I get like the theme of it, like the idea they're kind of rising from the sand, I think is cool. But just it's in terms of gameplay balance, it's probably the worst change that's happened the entire edition. I just don't think it makes any sense.
I think it's one of those things where tournament data can lie to you, right? One, if people aren't taking an army, doesn't mean it's bad. And two, if people aren't playing well with an army, it doesn't mean it's bad. So And I felt the same, and I tried to advocate against it for the ordered march change with the dwarves. I just don't think it was something that
I agree with that,
they needed. And I heard it coming, and I was saying to, people in power, I was like, no, no, they're already winning. This is just going to be too good. But
there were three changes in that clash book. There was the scouting EOD, there was the ordered march dwarfs, and there was the redeploying ogres, all of which were giving incredibly powerful tools to already very strong factions. And none of those made sense to me. I don't understand why they went in. I had great fun with the redeploying ogres, don't get me wrong. I ran a list at the beginning of the year. Not as part of this thing. No, not as part of this. But I took that Bristol event. Were you at Bristol at beginning of January, Steve? Yeah, you must have been. Yeah, of course you were. Your local horde. Yeah, I had 3 legions of ogre warriors, all with the redeploy. It was like an 8-drop 2,300 point list because it was just so neat. It was a lot of fun, but you could build an incredibly effective list using that redeploy, which people just haven't done yet, and I don't understand why. And it's just a really big own goal in terms of balance. I don't know why they did that. And I'm not knocking the RC. I know they have a really tough job, and it's so easy to miss stuff. But I think those 3, the ordered march,
they've done that a few times,
the redeploy, and particularly
they've done that a few times. They've readdressed things that haven't needed readdressing, or added things that to the list that didn't really need looking at. And you think, why have you done that?
Yeah, I think there's been again, to defend them, because they do a tough job. I think there's been some, over the course of the edition, there has been some rotation on the RC as well. So different people come in and they look at different things, and they kind of will address stuff that was missed previously by the old RC, but then they will, have their own foibles and slip-ups as well.
Exactly. So I was going to say every human has a significant amount of bias in some way, right? And I think sometimes that comes out in what gets addressed.
But that scouting EOD needs to go. For the next edition, that really needs to go. It's not healthy.
I had a mate playing EOD locally, and he was just was like just blissfully unaware of the change, and I played him with his EOD, and I can't remember if we had a draw or a win, and I said, "Mate, have you looked at the casket changes?" And I don't think he's lost a game since. And so Tony's question, I'll just mention it, but we've already asked it, is the new player-friendly army. And then what about this? This is a really interesting one from Grant. Are there any living legends that you would like to see have their story progressed, which could go hand in hand with new stats to reflect the progression or maybe better reflect their theme?
Yeah, I really like this question as well from Grant, actually. It's cool. It kind of goes more into the lore side of things. I don't know how much that factors into when you're doing your hobby stuff, Steve. But yeah, there's a lot of funky living legends in the thing. The one I'd like to see, I think, more, not necessarily kind of stats changed or anything like that. I think he's okay as he is, but more growth and development of the character is Mikhail, because I really enjoyed him when he was old Mikhail under the old Twilight Kin, and then the new direction they've gone with the Twilight Kin I really like from a lore perspective. I think it's cool, and I think it would be really fun to do some sort of...
You have to bring that back with Mikhail. You have to bring that back with Mikhail, what you've done to my...
Oh yeah, it was against you, wasn't it?
Mate.
Yeah, where he blew up a terror, and like Host Shadow Beast and Mikhail... Yeah. Went into the flank of a terror and just did like 20 wounds to it.
And I was like,
I got
funny. Terror.
Oh, I had forgotten about that. Yeah, that was delicious. But anyway, effectiveness on the table aside, I think he would be a cool character to base. You know how Mantic do these kind of like, or used to do these kind of like summer campaign type things. Do something around the Twilight Kin and have Mikhail as like the big bad guy for a campaign. I think would be really, really cool. I think he's a fun character.
I think they've got a lot of lovely characters out there that they've created, and there's plenty they can do with them. You know what I mean, story wise. So none actually come to the top of my head, but every character you look at, every special character you look in each of the factions, there's so much you can actually do with them.
A lot of potential.
There's so much potential there. Really
I haven't looked at him much since the change, but I used to think before the change anyway that Mikhail was almost the best collection of special rules reflecting fluff that we had in the game. You know,
he was definitely the Lord of Nightmares.
He was expensive, but he was just so representative of what he was meant to be on the table. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end of the questions. Is there anything that you guys think we haven't covered that you would like to say about your experience playing all the armies?
No, just it was a lot of fun. Everyone should try it.
It is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun.
Even if it takes a lot longer, just slowly, steadily work through them. As you get more involved in the community, or if you already are very involved, you know, there's a lot of nice people out there who will lend you an army. If you're not like Steve and you can't, you know, you're not productive like me. So yeah, and I think it's really, you learn a lot about the game, and I think it does make you a better player, and keeps things interesting, keeps a lot of variety, which is always fun. At least that's fun for me. So I'd really recommend it if you or not. It doesn't have to be all 28, but you know what I mean. Like kind of mix up and try new things, and that's part of the enjoyment of Kings of War.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, for you, people can follow your blog for Lazy Pirate.
Yeah, I've got my own Facebook group, Lazy Pirate Painting, and my own YouTube channel, which is the same name.
Great. And Chris, I guess most people just follow your adventures by watching the Kings of War Masters site and your time at the top.
Yeah, more.
I made Masters as well.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Hang on a sec, I made Masters as well, you know.
Yeah.
Steve qualified, but declined to attend.
Right,
he was above the.
Oh yeah. One of those. Yeah.
Nah. I'm you know, I pop up on the various Facebook forums to kind of give my opinion on things, probably too often, but I don't have a kind of, you know, my own page or Instagram or anything like that, so nothing to promote. But hopefully, whoever you are, see you at a tournament at sometime soon.
You know, if you want to see Chris rolling too many dice, go over to Death by Dragons and watch the Masters stream.
Two extra dice. Oh man, I felt so bad.
No, I know you did, which is why I bring it up. Yeah. Thanks. It works better when someone has the guilt attached.
They'll never let you forget it, mate. They'll never let you forget it.
No.
No, I know.
Yeah. And for us, the only thing I'd like to shout out is we should be getting announcements very soon from our hobby boys who are going to announce this year's hobby challenge and what you need to do for that. And I think we may be looking to kick it off in March, maybe April, but that's very soon to be announced. But otherwise, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for your time this evening. This evening, your time, this morning, my time. It's very enjoyable, and I think the listeners will get a lot out of hearing about your journey across 28 armies. It's perfect timing because the animals are waking up here. Yeah. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for giving up your time to join us.
No problem, mate.
You're very
enjoyable.
So that'll do us for tonight. Until next time, keep countercharging.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.